get started anyway. That way we can go get it recorded. So, all right. Well, welcome. Thanks for joining us for today's information session for the Early Literacy Educator Preparation Council. Today's conversation, as a reminder, is not a council business meeting where we're making decisions. It is an information session for the council to learn more about the perspectives of Oregon teachers and principals as it pertains to early literacy and implementation of the Oregon Literacy Framework. I recognize that today we're really just beginning the work of hearing from teacher and administrator perspectives and really leveraging the expertise that we already have on this council and inviting additional voices, but this is just a starting point. So today's meeting format is going to be an opportunity to hear from teachers, literacy specialists, and administrators, and we're grateful to hear from them today. I think that we should just go ahead and get started. So we will have Lynn Gardner from the Educator Advancement Council and Ken Greenbaum from the Oregon Department of Education facilitating our panel today. So with that, I will go ahead and hand it over to Lynn and Ken. And thank you so much for organizing this panel and for all of you for being here today. So Lynn and Ken.
Yeah, thank you, Pooja, and thank you, everyone. And we're just really grateful to have this space to begin to learn more about the experiences of teachers and administrators in Oregon from educators that are both serving as council members and a special guest as well, which we'll introduce here in a moment. And again, just thank you for your time and for sharing with us today your experiences and perspectives around early literacy from kind of a preparation to teaching kind of spectrum and your experience in schools. So the format of the panel discussion today, and we might modify a little bit given that we're a small group here and allow the conversation to develop organically, but we'll start off by having Lynn and I alternate asking questions. And again, we'll follow up with maybe clarifying questions or for elaboration as well if time allows. Again, we want to have plenty of time for discussion at 4:30. So panelists, we are here to hear from you. So please do take the time you need to answer questions, and we'll work together to be mindful of time and pacing and to share the air, so to speak. But again, we are here to hear from you. So please do unmute as well to build off of each other's answers. You need not wait for Lynn or I to prompt or go on to the next question, particularly the size of group we have today. Again, an invitation to respond to each other as well. Council members and specific council members who are not necessarily on the panel, and again, we can adjust this a bit. We were planning on having Q&A and discussion at the end, but given the size of our group, I think it makes sense. We'll kind of get a sense of timing, but please feel free to raise a hand via digital or otherwise, or put a question in the chat. And I think we can do that in real time as well, given the size of group. And again, just want to really allow time and space for our panelists to share. And lastly, two things we wanted to frame for the conversation. We're really not here to finger point or to elevate one particular program or approach, but rather we want to bring story and create proximity to teacher administrator experience to inform the council's work. And so this is really intended to be a holistic conversation and can inform not just the kind of immediate deliverable of the EPP standards, which have been a part of our work of late, but also the council's future work, including implementation and the other work to come. So with that, we'll pause to just see if there's any questions about the protocol and kind of how we'll move forward. And if not, Lynn will start us off. Any questions? Clarifying questions? All right, Lynn.
Great, hearing none. Well, we do want to start off with a brief introduction from our panelists. And again, thank you all for agreeing to come on at the end of your workday. And we'd like for you to introduce yourself and tell us about your teaching experiences briefly. You'll have more time for specific things later on, specifically around the literacy experiences you've had. But tell us what grade you're teaching and maybe even grades that you have maybe been teaching and the number of years as well. And if you were enrolled in an in-state or out-of-state educator preparation program, that would be great. And then also content areas and any reading endorsements that you have. So that's kind of the big framing for the introduction. And I'd love to ask Logan Nedrow, our guest new teacher here, if she would just start us off.
Hi, my name is Logan Nedrow, and I am a first-year teacher in third grade. I teach at North Powder Charter School, and can you still hear me? Okay. I started at North Powder as a paraprofessional, and then hired to be the preschool teacher and math intervention specialist. And then this year they rolled me into teaching third grade. So this will be my first year in third grade. And I am currently in the master's program at EOU.
Great, thank you. And I'll just kind of go around my screen. Julie, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Julie Reagan. I am currently working as a Title I teacher, and I'm split between two buildings in Lebanon School District. My buildings are K through 8, and I serve K through 5 students. I'm working in a different intervention model, teamed together with one special ed teacher and a teacher hired as an interventionist. And so we're all three working together to provide reading, math, and writing interventions to students. I graduated from Oregon State's MAT program in 1998. I spent a couple of years working in Sweet Home as a third grade teacher. Then I came to Lebanon. I've spent many of my years in Lebanon as a third grade teacher. In 2019, I accepted the Title I position. And I worked under a conditional license. And then in January of 2020, I enrolled in the Read Oregon program through PSU. And I wound up getting my reading endorsement in December of 2021.
Great, thank you. Shanaz?
Hi, I'm Shauna Sano. I am in Corvallis. I've been at the same elementary school for this is my 22nd year in at the same elementary school. I did not study education or teaching in undergrad. My bachelor's degree is in foreign language and international affairs with a minor in Latin American studies. I worked for a couple of years in Washington, D.C. in politics and grassroots organizing and international development before I decided I wanted to be a teacher. So I got my master's in education at Oregon State University in 2002, 2003, and I have been here and at the same school ever since. I spent my first 5 years in the classroom as a classroom teacher. And the next 16 years, I'm in my 17th year as literacy coach, intervention specialist. I have an ESOL endorsement. I have a Spanish language endorsement, and I have my reading endorsement. I I've taken a couple of sabbaticals. I went to New Zealand in 2015 as a Fulbright teacher. So I studied and did a capstone project in New Zealand on their early literacy, not only early literacy, but also their early childhood education system. When I came back from that, I dove into dyslexia work. I did dyslexia training in Oregon in about 2016. And then I spent 6 months teaching in a dual language school in Costa Rica in 2017. So that was a chance to go back. I did that. I was a classroom teacher for that time in Costa Rica. And yeah, came back to my same school, and that's where I am. I also taught at one class per term at Oregon State University for a few years. I taught the class in their double degree program, the time that was all encompassing of differentiated instruction and classroom management.
Great, thank you so much. And Jennifer?
Hi, I'm Jennifer Witten. I'm currently the principal of an elementary school in Beaverton, Oregon, Greenway Elementary, and we have a pre-K and then K through 5 at our school of about 300 students. I did my teacher training out of state. I went to Smith College in Massachusetts, where it was a program learning at their lab school. So I was a part-time faculty member, and then worked at the school on site of the graduate program. And then I took the Massachusetts, there was a teacher test that we had to take for licensure. And then right after that, moved out to Oregon. And so I did the license back from, I think we had a reciprocity with Massachusetts. So that's how I did my license to be a teacher in Oregon. I taught at Beaver Acres, was the school that I was hired at coming from Massachusetts, and started in first grade. It was the only grade I did not want because I actually didn't feel that I was ready to teach reading. But that was the position they had. So I jumped in and learned quite a bit those first 2 years, but then moved up to 4th and 5th grade. Always still teaching reading. Beaver Acres was a school very impacted by poverty. It's a Title I school. I was there for 18 years. In the meantime, I had done my admin license, but was not ready to leave the classroom. So I had a job share as a classroom teacher. It was the best of both worlds, classroom teacher and then intervention teacher. So I was intervention in the morning, and then in the afternoon, I taught reading and science and social studies. So I was able to kind of walk through the school with those two lenses. When I decided to leave the classroom, I was an assistant principal at Finley Elementary for 1.5 years. And then the position opened at Greenway mid-year. And so I moved over here, and I've been here with this amazing community ever since. And it's a fantastic place to be part of. So there's mine.
Wonderful. And before we dive into some of the other questions here, thank you all for your just service to our kids and just the breadth of experience represented here. So thank you. So this first question is for all panelists, and whomever feels ready to unmute whenever they like can jump right in. I'll also put the question in the chat. It's in the agenda as well, but just so you have it to reference. During your learning experiences in an educator preparation program, what preparation, so for example, coursework, student teaching, did you receive and participate in to teach early literacy? And to what extent did these learning experiences help prepare you to teach early literacy in the first or second year of teaching, and why? So again, whoever feels ready to process and jump in.
I can jump in. That's a really easy question for me. I didn't receive any preparation in early literacy. I did in my master's cohort, we were for our language arts methods class, we were divided into those of us who were doing student teaching experiences in primary grades and those of us who were doing student teaching experiences in intermediate grades. And I was doing my student teaching experience in an intermediate grade. So we didn't focus on early literacy at all in our coursework. So I had exposure to students in all reading ranges in the classroom that I did my student teaching in, but in terms of specific preparation for how to teach early literacy, I didn't do any coursework on that.
I'll chime in. I would say I had a very similar experience. I know that we had a general class on reading. I did my internship in a 2nd grade classroom and in a 5th grade classroom, focused more on comprehension, but nothing on acquiring literacy skills. when I started teaching in Beaverton in 99, I would say that was the first time when the guided reading book was published by Fontes and Pinnell. And so I know that year before I started teaching, I bought a copy of that. And then when I started, I had like a bag of clothespins for our book room. So it was kind of those two things in a first grade classroom. And then by about November of that year, I was digging through a cupboard of like some old reading, like older reading copies that had more of a progression. And I was reading some articles, and luckily there was a substitute who's a very experienced teacher. So she would work with me after school to implement some literacy. So I learned a little bit through some trial and error and lots of not very successful practices until I was able to structure a better plan.
I guess I'll go next. So I told you guys before that I graduated from Oregon State's MAT program in 1998. So that was a long time ago. And at that time, it was about, like whole word reading, and it's like escaping me at the moment, whole language. So it was like about whole language. And I did my student teaching time in a first grade classroom for a while. And then something that I think was the most beneficial to me was I got to spend extra time in my student teaching experience because I was in a classroom called College Connections. So what that was, Shanaz, you're probably familiar with Garfield Elementary School. And at the time, Garfield had this College Connections program, and what it was their where they had like a larger classroom. They had these physically collapsing walls, that were like curtains that would collapse. And there was one master teacher. Three of us were interns, and we were at the school with our master teacher, and we didn't go to class at the university as much. And then there was a larger class of students, like 35, 38, something like that. And we were responsible for a lot of teaching and small group instruction and things that happened. So I feel like that that student teaching experience, that extra time that I got to spend in that College Connections classroom was really beneficial to me. And then, as I became a teacher and worked, I honestly do not remember having like a core curriculum in Sweet Home when I very first started there. I remember just like scrounging resources together. And then I came to Lebanon, and that was around 2000. Balanced literacy was kind of coming about, it seemed like, in our district. And we used, we had like core curriculum resources then. And then my interest in reading just kind of evolved. And then in 2019, I took the Title I job and enrolled in the Read Oregon program. And then there was I actually have my Read Oregon program of study guide here, and I went through it, and I was looking at some of, just foundations, strategies, diverse learners, assessment, leadership, and then a couple of elective courses were required. And I would say that a lot of my most recent knowledge has come from that program, and then a lot of just reading on my own, podcasts, Facebook groups, developing an interest in the science of reading, and seeking out resources and people.
I can go next. So I did not go into education when I graduated high school, and then I changed my mind halfway through. So my senior year at EOU, I took Rhonda Fritz's reading clinic, and that is where I really was like my first glimpse at anything teaching reading. I was in multidisciplinary studies was my degree, so I was in some education classes, but I had never really heard about anything until the reading clinic that I took. And then I took Rhonda's reading clinic at EOU, and then the following year I decided to be her student worker for the reading clinic, so I got a double dose of it, which was great. And then this year in the master's program, I'm currently enrolled in the master's program, and I really appreciate the reading courses that we have. It's very broken up into the science of reading. We've discussed phonemic awareness like in our first term, then we moved to phonics the second term, and then now we're combining fluency and vocabulary, and then our last term in the program will be comprehension. And so they're really trying to help teachers be better prepared and not just throw them to the wolves. And so I really appreciate like the work that they're doing and actually giving us like concrete things to take back into our classroom. And so that's been very beneficial to me. And then just at my school, we have a strong reading intervention specialties, and they're very helpful as well. So I, thank goodness, have had a good teaching program to help me really learn how to teach reading. I struggled a lot in reading, and so I feel for the students in my class that are struggling along, and so I really find it very beneficial for the programs that I have gone through to help those students as well. So I have a good outlook on that and can't wait to learn more as we continue on.
Thank you, everyone. And I'll pass it off to Lynn here. And if I've been listening carefully, I think a common thread around stating the obvious, kind of the role of kind of the contextualized on the ground learning, that kind of wide variety of experiences there, but the role of that both during and immediately after your preparation experiences. So with that, Lynn has our next question, and I'm happy to put that in the chat as well. Lynn.
Sure. Dr. Archer, you did have your hand raised, so I wanted to pause there. Yeah.
So I'm coming at this from having 50 years ago gone through teacher education. But this is a dichotomy that's been very present in the major universities that I was at. And that was, I was in a program that was in special ed. And then I taught in special ed at University of Oregon and San Diego State. And 50 years ago, we knew what to teach. And so teachers in special ed would not say that they learned nothing. When I went to school with Joe Jenkins and Tom Lovett, researchers in reading, we knew about teaching phonics. We knew about teaching phonemic awareness. We knew about teaching vocabulary. We knew about teaching comprehension. We had way back when, 94-142, the year that special ed law came out that allowed special ed students into general ed inclusive settings, we were totally prepared to teach reading. And it is really, and I bet, Rhonda, did you have a similar experience?
My undergrad was in general education. So, but what I did, I noticed that dichotomy while I was in my doc program at U of O. Because I knew so much had come out of U of O, I expected to go there and see both general and special education teaching explicit instruction in literacy. And that isn't what I found. It was a dichotomy. We did work some together, but there was a lot of room for growth there. So my undergrad, I definitely I was not prepared, but that was in gen ed. So yeah, similar.
That word reading might be only needed for special ed students or intervention students simply is not true. Even state law says that our dyslexia law says that those content needs to be taught to all children using the standards within the International Dyslexia Association, because they recognize everyone learning how to read, everybody needs everything. So I'm really glad that we're going to leap above that dichotomy so that all teachers in general ed and special ed have the knowledge that will allow them to teach reading. So that was just a momentary looking back on history, and in general ed, I learned nothing except good literacy books for young children.
Yeah, I was, thank you for that. I was thinking about that, just listening to everyone's shared experiences of thinking in time, right? Like how programs have also progressed, having Logan kind of finish up. And I saw a lot of you nodding your heads when she was describing her program experience. So I think that that's definitely something to take away from that shared experience. And Logan, I am going to put you back on the spot again, because we did want to focus a little bit on new teacher experiences. And I think you've already kind of given us a little bit of what that description is like. But is there anything that you can talk a little bit more in depth and detail about with the successes that you've been able to use for teaching early literacy so far in your experiences, and then any areas that might be kind of some challenges for you, and you know, any of those kind of insights that you've been learning, knowing that you've only been teaching for 3 years?
I think one of the biggest things for me personally is I don't like to fail, for lack of a better word. And so when I took Rhonda's reading clinic, it was very interesting to me because I was just the youngest one there and fresh off the streets there. And so I heard a lot of more experienced teachers talking about how this was brand new to them as well. And so that was really eye-opening for me, thinking, okay, if I'm just learning it now along with them who have been experienced teachers and teaching in the classroom for a long time, that made me feel better. And then just them reinforcing, like asking for help, I think was another big thing for me as I enter into teaching different grades, is not everybody knows, and that's okay. And just being able to reach out to people that can help you. Our specialists at our school are fantastic. I reach out to Rhonda a lot, and I reach out to my EOU professor, Jess Hagedorn. She's great as well. And so just having those resources there. I think one of the biggest things, I walked into the classroom thinking that when you're handed a curriculum, it is all in that curriculum and everything's there. And that was really eye-opening. The curriculum that we have, there's like a lot of holes, and like you have students at first grade reading. I have students at first grade reading level, and then I have students on grade level. So there's just a wide variety, as all of you know, in a classroom, and that reading curriculum you have might not be beneficial for everybody. And so I think the thing that I got the most from right now in the MAT program is being able to add differentiations. And I think that that is one of the biggest things that is kind of missed. You're expected to teach third grade, and you want everyone to be on third grade reading level, and then teachers go in there, and then you have students that can't even read the first 3 sentences in the story or things like that. So that's been something that I've struggled with, but also gained a lot of information from listening to everybody, is being able to help those students who aren't on grade level, even when you're teaching out of the third grade curriculum. That's just one thing that I'm thankful for, is being able to have those additional intervention pieces thrown at me. Walpole and McKenna is something that I use in the classroom a lot. We use the 95% reading curriculum for small group intervention. We do walk to reading, and that's K through 5. So everyone gets and 30-minute interventions with the 95% reading curriculum. And I think a lot of students in my cohort talk to me about not having that additional reading curriculum for intervention time. And I know a lot of teachers that are in my teacher prep program talk about how they like print everything off of teachers paying teachers and things like that. So I am thankful that we have real curriculum in our school district that has helped me along as well, because if I had to Google something on teachers paying teachers, I'd be like, what do I even look for? So I think just having that has really helped me as well. Just the knowledge that I'm lucky to have because of all the other people that have put in the effort to learn more has been beneficial for me, I think. And I'm sure more things will come across that I have no clue about, but I have good resources to reach out to. And I know some people just don't have that. So I think I'm very lucky. And yeah.
Thank you. And I do want to extend the questions, and thanks, Ken, for popping them into the chat, to the rest of the panel. If you want to just unmute, thinking about this question, the areas where in teaching early literacy that have been the most successful for you, and maybe why might that have been, has that been successful? I think I heard one of the things that resonated with me from Logan was just the resources that are provided in the network, but areas that might have been challenging for you, maybe in teaching early literacy, and why might those have been?
If I'm going to talk about, like, do you want me to answer related to like when I first started teaching like 25 years ago?
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I think we're getting a deep sense of all of this. It depends on how you want to approach the question. I mean, yeah.
Okay. Because I have just worked as a reading interventionist in the last 5 years. And so I feel like, my experiences have been different. When I very first graduated and I was a classroom teacher, I just didn't know, I just didn't know a lot. I just had a very broad understanding of reading. And at that time, it was like, buy some nice lamps and put them in your classroom, have a great classroom library and some nice places for them to sit and read and do dear, and it's going to be good. And that was kind of how it was when I very first started teaching. And then the Oaks test, now called Smarter Balance, became a very big thing. I have taught third grade, and the focus of the test and passing the test became super huge. And it was all kind of centered around comprehension and all the comprehension skills you needed to teach so that they could pass this test. But I soon realized, like, oh my gosh, they can't read the passages. Because I've always worked in Title I schools. I've never worked in schools that were not Title I. And then, when you're like, oh my gosh, this is crazy, they can't even read these passages, there's no way they're going to answer comprehension questions. That's when I really started trying to learn more about like how kids learn to read. Because as a third grade teacher, you're always told that kids start to read to learn in third grade, not learn to read. They're supposed to be coming to you already knowing how to read. But that's not the case in a lot of Title I schools that I've, in the few that I've worked in. And so then that's kind of how my interest in reading developed. And I sought out some different programs. I've been to different conferences and things. And I think I shared with Rhonda once before in one of our sessions that like my first really big aha moment was when I went to a conference. Anita was a speaker. And then I attended a workshop that was this really great reading is the program. And the instructor taught us about syllable types and reading multisyllabic words. Multisyllabic words are a big deal in third grade. And I was just like so excited because I felt like I had some tools to go back to my classroom with and like to start teaching kids how to approach these big words that they didn't know how to read. Because before that, I didn't really have any idea. So, that's kind of how it evolved for me over time. And then just, now as an interventionist, I have programs like Logan mentioned. We operate off of basically like phonics for reading, rewards. We have some other programs that we use, but we try to support the youngest kids within the core program that they're currently using as much as possible, because I once listened to a webinar by Dr. Archer, and she said that you should not deviate too much out of that when they're really young. So we've tried to work and support them within their core program. And, you know, they're just basically learning a lot of letter names and letter sounds, and the alphabet is the alphabet. But that's kind of how it's evolved for me.
Julie,
Yes. I can't hear you. I think you're on mute.
so I've really enjoyed working with you on this project. Can you just tell me the name of the core program at your school site now?
Yes, we are currently using the Amplify Core Knowledge Language Arts program.
Amplify, and so it is and the total name of it is?
Well, we refer to it, some people refer to it as Amplify, some people refer to it as CKLA. I think Amplify is the publisher. It was initially that free resource, and then Amplify bought it, and
So it's
I'm not sure exactly how.
Only, dear one, I just want to, later we'll connect on a program that could be laid upon that to really take care of the early literacy. So I think that, yes, I just got a notification of a grant that's available. And so I'm going to share it with you, Julie. All right.
Fabulous.
Fabulous.
All right, thank you. And any others? And this again could be, I liked, Julia, how you kind of extended it from when you first started teaching and then where you are now. Any other folks that want to speak to that question around teaching early literacy, successes and challenges?
Yeah, I can speak a little to that because I already said that I didn't do any coursework in my master's program, and I ended up with my very own classroom and my very own students, and they were 4th and 5th graders, and many of them couldn't read, several of them even at a 1st grade level. And I was like, oh my goodness, how did anybody give me a license to teach? I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to do this. So what ended up over many, many years being successful was I just sought out every training, every conference that often looked like writing grants to be able to get money to attend a conference or a training. It often looked like begging for funds from the school or the district to go. And it quite often looked like funding my own travel to participation in conferences. Anita Archer came to our school district early in my career, and that was a profound professional development day for me. I realized there is a way to do this. I need to learn more. A couple of classes in my reading endorsement programs stood out. One in particular that was taught by a professor at Eastern Oregon University. But a lot of what I did in my reading endorsement was a little bit more, was still very choose your own adventure, balanced literacy focused that time. So I would say my last 7 years has been the steepest improvement curve for me in terms of really learning the nitty gritty and what really works for kids and what all kids need. I love hearing Logan's experience coming through teacher prep now. I would also say I notice we don't get a lot of student teachers, but when I do, I definitely notice that our newer teachers have a lot more knowledge than a lot of our veteran teachers at this point. And then it's been interesting to reflect on the fact that it's easier to coach sometimes our newer teachers than to try to help our more veteran teachers realize that there are different things that we need to be doing. So yeah, I think the hardest thing is the fact that what has been so successful for me required a lot of my own finding it, funding it, etc. Particularly because I work in a Title I school, but I also work in a Title I bilingual school. So finding the intersectionality between multilingualism and literacy is an added layer of complexity. So all of the work that this council has been doing in the direction that I feel like our state is ready to go gives me great hope.
I have had from just a lot of similar experiences. I would say when my first year that I was teaching in 99, I did subscribe to the reading teacher because that was a quarterly journal, and there was some great articles about teaching striving readers how to read. And I remember reading that article, and it had a lot of really good, using multimodal sensory things, using magnetic letters. So I brought those in to my classroom, and then it was constantly a journey over my 18 years as a teacher to build a progression. I was constantly searching for like which program was going to help that progression, because I always had small groups that I was working with, but I felt like I was making the progression up, and there were pieces that I didn't have in my own understanding of other pieces, like the phonemic awareness piece that was missing, or just the different ways to map a sight word. So I felt like I started it a long time ago trying to figure it out. And I knew, like, I used McCracken spelling, but I bought that. It was like $20. That was it built upon it. And it was a spelling, it was that I would dictate to students. And it did build on a spelling progression, and it had blends and CK words, but I think that the way that we're really seeing a shift now does make me feel more hopeful, because it's a lot more explicit to students and to the teacher. But I feel like I've been on this trajectory of trying to get what we need in place that I am seeing now. That's really a lot better, more targeted and more explicit.
Wonderful. Thank you. And we'll pivot here slightly, and Jennifer, will ask this question of you first, but again, others certainly kind of adjust or apply to your experience as well. So you've spoken a bit already around like your experience in terms of teaching early literacy. Curious as to how that has, influenced your, leadership or leading of professional development, or making decisions about professional development as a school principal in your building. So, how's that experience influenced, and how's that preparation influenced your ability to lead for or lead professional development as an elementary principal? And what support you receive from your district for early literacy instruction?
Yeah, I think the best part was just that I taught for so long, and to bring that lens, like taught reading for so long, into a building. And the first thing that when I got here, I had used the leveled library intervention from Fondas and Pinnell as an intervention teacher, and knew like the phonics piece was all over the place. Like we'd read a book and it would be the short A, and then the next week it was like blends. So when I got to the school that I'm at now, I have an amazing like she's funded through Title I. Actually, she's funded now through my general fund. And she's at my reading intervention teacher. And I now have two. And she and I talked because we, as a district, we could purchase the Fondas and Pinnell phonics. This was about 5 years ago. And she and I talked about how we both felt like it was it was just kind of all over the place. So we didn't even unbox it. And we had been using the units of study. And so I used my Title I budget to purchase the units of study phonics program. So a couple of buildings were trying that out. And that would be one thing as a principal, like knowing how to get ahead of the resources that I need and using different budget sources to get what teachers needed into the classroom. So we used that for a little while. It was better than what we needed, but it felt like it still was not consistent enough. And then She went and did the letters training with my other academic coach. And the two of them together came back from the letters training, which isn't a curriculum. It's a really deep dive into how we acquire literacy. And they came back like, okay, we really got to make some changes. So we began, and I feel like my leadership is always very open to like, what can we try? Like, what can we do? Because our numbers, the outcome that we're having right now is not, we don't have many students on grade level. So we first shifted in our intervention groups, and she had that freedom to do that, to really not use the LLI anymore. And we started doing much smaller groups, much more targeted groups. Our district was using the independent reading leveling assessment for reading, but she in addition was using the core screener. So she and I talked and we said, let's just screen everybody now. And then we built our own spreadsheet. So we were really tracking their skills and having those conversations. And then with my building schedule, I was able to be creative and flexible about some teacher release time last year. So the teachers at my school are released every 6 days to meet with either our behavioral health and wellness team or the academic coach team. And that time is really like a lot of looking at data, and then they were infusing everything from letters. So we began to see more shifts in classroom practice. I think a lot very quickly. Teachers were really open to it, but they were getting coached by the academic coaches in collaboration as well. So those were things like where I think about like there were systems in place that I was able to be creative, and then just having a really amazing 2 teachers who were trained. Our district started to infuse like secret stories, Haggerty. So those were starting to be infused into what we had. And so and just to see those take off and having the training available for that, the Haggerty took off really well. And then last year, opening up to use UFly. And then again, teachers were like really able to jump in because they had the coaching from my 2 academic coaches. But I think now, so that piece of like knowing that like there were really missing pieces, and not just knowing it as a classroom teacher, but being able to walk through my building K-5 and see, okay, where are holes? Where do we need to fill in? And then having a team to be able to talk through, okay, this is what we're seeing. How are we going to develop the PD? Are we going to do PD in collaboration, or are we going to do it all school? And I think we're just continuing. I would say right now I'm in the admin program for letters. So this week I finally got to a chapter on like a tool for observing, not like a tool for observing, the different indicators for teacher evaluation, but a tool for observing like what literacy practices am I seeing. So I was able to be in about 5 classrooms this week, and just using that tool to see like so many great things are happening. I mean, like really awesome stuff, but I always like to see that through line as a principal. I walk through the building, pre-K, walk a lot, what do I see? Where do I see? And then I'll either put things in a newsletter, I'll design PD, and then I work with my academic coaches. Just, they're incredible. So it's been really exciting. I'd say the last couple of years for us has felt the most exciting because we're seeing a lot more improvement.
Thank
So
you.
Jennifer,
Dr.
Jennifer,
Archer,
what's
please.
fascinating is that what you just went through is the history of reading in America. You've got to experience all of it.
Yes.
And you look back though, and you say, there's some things there that simply did not teach kids how to read. And it's really sad that we even had decades where we were using the wrong stuff. But you should write a book. Just, this is what we did first, and this is what we did next. And now we're being saved, we hope. Yeah.
Shaughness, please.
I just wanted to add on to something that Dr. Archer was just saying, and kind of touching on what Julie was saying earlier about curriculum. It's hard when teachers don't have the training themselves and they're just told, follow this curriculum. And curricula are published by publishing companies, and publishing companies have one overarching goal, which is to make money. And then they need to make their product marketable to everybody. So everything that any possible school demographic collection of students, teachers could need is tried to be packaged into this curriculum, which ends up with way more than any teacher could ever fit into their literacy block. So if our teachers don't know what is most important, how do I prioritize? Often what is left out are the pieces that are the most critical for kids to develop independent, proficient learning skills that they can apply independently as they go on. So one of our problems is when we just rely on, and even if we have, it's a really, really critical first step or piece to have a curriculum that is aligned with the science of reading. When I say that, I'm talking about all lowercase. I'm not talking acronym SOR. Science belongs to everybody. That science is a big field. But without teachers having the training and the understanding of how to weed through that and prioritize what's available and differentiate for their kids, it's not enough, and it's not the answer.
Thank you, Shauna's. And I know we have one more question here to cover here, but I think we have time. And Jennifer, I'm wondering if I could ask just a little follow up to your response. You described a lot of essentially decision points or skills you were able to, implement or activate as a school leader from your experience as a teacher. Staffing choices, PD choices, school schedule choices, with the lens around leading for early literacy. I'm curious if you could reflect on how your preparation as a teacher or administrator kind of created the conditions or not for you to kind of have the lens of some of the things you kind of described you've implemented.
Yeah, I think one of the things was definitely my lens as an intervention teacher and plotting the graphs on the LLI and just not seeing that growth happening to where they were ever going to close the gap. So that would be the one piece where, because then I taught at a Title I school, and then I'm the principal of a school that is also a Title I school. So consistently knowing that there were gaps and reasons for that, reasons for why children are coming in and needing that support, but just the urgency of it, it's always just felt so urgent. And I never felt like we were able to make that growth necessary. So I would say that for teacher preparation, I loved my teacher preparation. It was really a great model because I was in a lab school. And I got so many amazing ways to teach and engage and have integrated learning and have it be very, very connected. And I always taught like that as a teacher with lots of integration and connection for student engagement. So those pieces I brought along with me, but the nitty gritty of teaching children how to read always felt like I was trying to play catch up as a teacher for many years. And to add, last year I have this incredible new teacher, and she launched her classroom last fall. And I just remember it was just this beautiful learning environment. And then in about October, she just kind of was like, and now how do I teach kids how to read? Because she's a first grade teacher. And she dug so in. She's amazing. But she was one of the reasons why I applied to be on the council. Like, how has this happened? Like she spent the whole year, she took again, she came to me and said, can I take this class? It was the Shifting the Balance class. Then we were just kind of throwing so much at the wall to try and help her. But she did a lot of reading and podcasts on her own. And I just saw an amazing shift in her own classroom. And she is in the letters program this year. I was in her classroom this week, and it's just incredible. The amazing learning environment that she has, but then also very intentional small groups that are building on skills. So I don't know if I answered your question. I felt like I started to ramble again. Sorry, Ken.
No, thank you. Appreciate it. I know we appreciate it.
Well, you actually kind of started to segue into our last question, Jennifer. So that was a great response. And I'm also going to encourage Logan, if you want to join in on this in this particular question, but it's really looking at the perspectives across the spectrum of all of your various positions. But what strengths are you observing for new, pre-K through third grade teachers coming into your schools with teaching early literacy? So Jennifer, you kind of teed that up really nicely in like talking about that new teacher. And then what are some areas of needs that you also are seeing that they may need some support with? And I'll just kind of open that up to the floor, to the whole panel. Whoever wants to jump in.
So I do work in 2 different buildings, and one of my buildings has a far more senior staff with less turnover. The one building that I'm in today had a ton of turnover, and so we have a bunch of new teachers this year. And it's interesting. I think that being a teacher is such an overwhelming job that, there are so many things that you have to put together when you're a teacher. You have to, be prepared, be organized. You need to have strong classroom management skills. I think I see them struggling with having like strong knowledge of like instructional routines, and I see them struggling with like managing, like Shanaz said, all of the curriculum, all of the content. They're not really sure how to weed through it and pick out the important pieces. But I do see them knowing a little. I feel like they know a little bit more about like phonemic awareness and some of those things. They know way more than I did when I walked out of school 25 years ago. But I think that the job itself is just so much, and it's a lot of catching your breath and keeping your head above water when you're starting.
So I started out as a paraprofessional, was my first job at North Powder, and I truly believe that was the best thing for me because I was in classrooms K through 5, and so I saw a lot of different teaching styles, management styles, as well as how different teachers taught out of curriculum or intervention groups or things like that. And I truly believe that was the best thing for me because I did see a lot of new variety and different variety. And that was something that I was able to take into my classroom. I liked this thing or didn't like this way or things like that. And I think that set up my classroom pretty strong for a first year teacher in third grade, just because I had all that previous knowledge from paraproing, and then I was a preschool teacher before third grade, and classroom management was something you had to master at that little age. But I think that that was one of the most beneficial things. It's just that hands-on experience. No matter how great a teacher prep program is, until you get into the classroom and some kid throws a chair across the room, like you just don't know how to handle those situations until they happen to you. And a thing that I did struggle with right off the bat was how to teach out of the curriculum. They have like 20 pages of interactive workbook for like one story. And I was like, how do I get through all of this? Like I was just drowning I was taking hours of things home while doing my teacher prep program. I literally bought a little wheeling wagon to take everything home each night to make sure I was prepared. And then finally, after like 3 weeks of doing that, of drowning and just not really feeling like my students were learning anything and we weren't making progress, I went to our intervention team and said, okay, what do I need to do and what can I cut out? And so basically we cut all the fluff out and then just focus on like the core things. But again, if you don't have a team that supports you, or if you're not willing to ask those questions, first year teachers are going to drown, just like the emotional state and then the physical, taking everything home, trying to be prepared, trying to be your best. And so that was a big thing. As just a newbie trying to learn through things, I'm glad I learned it early on in my school year, and I'm not still trying to figure out how to do it now. But there's just like the work-life balance, I think too, is just a huge thing. But I really think until students get that hands-on experience, they won't be 100% prepared, and we all are learning still. I have very experienced teachers that are at my school that actually taught me. I'm teaching at the school that I went K through 12 through, and I have very experienced teachers coming to me as well, and just like bouncing ideas off of each other. So just that camaraderie too, for supports is a huge thing as well. It's just really important when you get into a new school or wherever you're teaching, just to create those supports and lean on each other and not just try to stay to yourself. I think that's an important part too.
Anyone else? Yeah.
Oh, go Shanaz. Yeah.
I'll just piggyback onto that. Something when I first became our literacy coach and RTI specialist, one of our tenets is that our highest needs students would be served by the most qualified teachers. So when we were making groupings and assigning us instructors to groupings, our certified classroom teachers would be working with the higher needs kids in that grade level of RTI. And something that has shifted, and what Logan was just talking about made me think of this, is that currently in several of our grades, it's our paraprofessionals have at this point have had much more training, and they are the ones that I have daily contact with and daily coaching with and almost daily or weekly professional development with. Whereas I have much less contact with teachers because they have to prep for their whole entire day and they have all of the other things that they have to do. So because of that, still following the students with highest needs need to be with the most highly trained instructors. For a lot of our grades, our highest trained instructors are our paraprofessionals who have had more of the access to learning the real how-tos and have just a better understanding at this point of the explicit early literacy instruction. So that was when you were talking about that, Logan, saying that being a paraprofessional first was something that has set you up the most. That makes a lot of sense to me in that regard. Classroom teachers just have so much, and those classroom teachers who've already been doing it for a long time, it's even harder to kind of swap out some of the tools in their toolbox that they're pretty accustomed to using.
I think adding that piece about, are you done, Shanaz? You good?
I was just going to say that I need to switch to my phone because I need to get in the car and start to drive to Portland. So I'm switching devices.
Thank you. I was just going to add on at the end that I don't have a lot of new teachers here. However, the teachers that we've had for a long time have just absolutely been very curious about how they can shift and do what's the best for kids. And there's been a lot of excitement around reflection of practice, reflection of past practices, of really learning new things. But there are also like sometimes just a lot of new. And then I think, Logan, I think hearing that, like, what do I need to do so I'm not taking the wagon home at night? Like, how can we all support each other to pare down and feel really empowered that we can make those decisions, and then we can see the benefit for students. For the areas of needed supports, something I've been thinking about recently, I was recently at a conference, and when specifically, I think there's a lot more work we can do to identify and pre-screen, and having really good early screening tools. And specifically in the oral language in our pre-K, that's what maybe we will implement by the end of this year, is either an oral language screener so that we can begin to identify early and act early. And even in our community with our youngest learners, 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, if we can do community events to really begin to identify and know those, have a really solid screener, so that we can identify and then support. And I think that those assessment and screener tools help us then to be able to see where we're at and then have supports in place to know what to do with that. So I've been thinking a lot about that lately.
Thank you, Jennifer. So with that, we wanted to kind of move to whole group discussion or Q&A, just in terms of like some reflections, what's been resonating, things that connect with you to the work and directive of the council. With that, I think, Pooja, if there's some additional questions to prompt either the council or the entire group here, again, we kind of open it up from these additional questions to just kind of a group discussion and reflection. So,
and can I give one comment before we do that, based on the last three people?
Yes.
One of the things that I think is really important in higher education today is that there is much more, districts are going to be adopting core curriculum for reading and for math. And we've always put a lot of emphasis on writing lesson plans, which becomes very irrelevant. What's really relevant is to be able to look at a curriculum and annotate it and go from some interventions that I would believe that some of you are using, like phonics for reading, rewards, reading mastery, are very highly designed. So you have to read them, but you don't have to do a lot more. But then there's programs where you need to go through and say, cut the fluff. What do I absolutely not need here? And then programs where you need to add because they don't have enough active participation, do that. This is a very different way of training people to use the tools that are available so they don't have to go to Teachers Pay Teachers and have unstructured materials. So we're working on adding that kind of thing where what are the tools that you're given and how are you going to systematically respond to them? For example, going through and pulling out the sequence of the materials, going through and analyzing the amount of practice that is given. Do we need more space practice, more? So it is a different take on it than doing it without any concern about the tools.
Yeah, and to add to that, Jennifer, when you were talking about your motivation for coming on the council, I share that motivation with you, but also that was kind of my motivation to move into higher ed, because I was seeing teachers come into our building that were still learning what I learned in 1992, and that I had learned through my own trying to figure it out, like you have all described. And so that really was the springboard to get into higher ed. And then I also want to talk a little bit about what Anita said. We've been having a lot of those conversations across our faculty. And I just had the same conversation with a group of teachers today on the lesson plan issue and on the curriculum piece, and not having, I think, Julie, you talked about, or maybe it was Shanaz, about how the curriculums are so large and not having enough background knowledge to understand what can be cut, what is fluff and what is not fluff. And so all of those pieces, I think, are such important considerations for us as we move forward as a council, to make sure that we're not necessarily just teaching them how to write a lesson plan because somebody's already done that work and someone has put a lot of research and effort into that. So how can we teach them most effectively to use those tools? And the last thing I want to say is what Logan said about the parapro situation, and that being her really fertile ground for learning. That gives us some really important information about recommendations we may need to make on practicums that are very specific to these things that we're talking about today. So making sure our students have those kinds of experiences prior to the first day they walk into their own classroom.
And Rhonda, aren't you doing that when you have in your reading lab tutorials where they're teaching one-on-one with very systematic, so that they can start with something that's They don't have to write lesson plans for. They teach it as it is, and they learn how to teach as they're doing it. So that was brilliant of you.
Yeah, and I can't take credit for that. That really has, I'm still learning so much from other universities that have come before me, and that's our baby step start. But I would like to see that next step, because going from one-on-one tutoring to even a small group brings a whole different set of skills that they will need, but it is a good start.
Something else I'd like to add that I think would be beneficial for new teachers is just like understanding assessment. I think that's something that I didn't understand as a new teacher. You know, I would do all of the things that they told me to do, and then I would get like the printout, you know, that's like red, yellow, green, you know, grouping the kids. Like, we currently use STAR. And I would create groups based on that. And that is like so, oh my gosh, I cringe now. But you know, I didn't know how to do it any other way, or how to get more specific. I did, you know, learn like through instruction. I would realize, oh, all of these kids don't know how to read vowel, consonant, E words. I'm going to pull that little group and I'll work with them. And, you know, as I became a more experienced teacher, I was able to do that. But, you know, now working as a reading interventionist, you know, we do like the STAR assessment as a whole, you know, K-5, and then we do easy CBM stuff, and then, you know, as like risk is popping up and we're seeing some red flags, then we're doing some phonics screeners and some in-program assessments, so that like we can really like drill down and get to where these kids need to have their intervention. And as a classroom teacher, I never really fully understood how to do that, how to drill down.
Logan, yes, thank you.
I just want to go back to the lesson plan thing really quickly. I've filled out far too many, in my opinion, 10+ page lesson plans, which I think is so absurdly unrealistic. Teachers do not have time for that when they are actually teaching in the classroom. And I have a very negative attitude about having to fill out a very detailed lesson plan, because it just is so unrealistic to when you get into the classroom, especially when you're teaching multiple subjects. But I hope that eventually the lesson plan thing, I get the purpose of maybe a couple times, but having to create this lesson plan for a lesson you're not even going to teach in the classroom is very hard for me to wrap my head around behind the purpose of that. And just the unrealistic, no one has time for that when they're actually teaching. Like, no one on a Tuesday night is going to sit down and fill out that 10-page I do, you do, we do, every single word you're going to say in the lesson plan. And it's just not teaching us what we need to know on how to actually teach things in the classroom. So I appreciate Dr. Archer bringing that up, because that has been one of the biggest things I have struggled with through the undergrad and through the master's program, is the lesson plan template that is being pushed down our throats, and it's so unrealistic time-wise. And what is it actually doing for you to being able to really teach to the your best ability and to provide for the students the best you can? So that's my little soap opera, but on the lesson plan template.
I got so upset about this when I went to look at teacher training programs, that I actually did a podcast that I will send you just on this, that there is a range, and only occasionally would you ever have to do one of those, because it is unrealistic. But, you know, when you first started today, I wrote down what people thought were important. One was having instructional routines. Now, that would help. so that you could apply the routines to materials versus writing campus plan. Learning to focus on what was most important, because cut the fluff and teach this stuff, and they are so fluffy. And then how to use tools, and assessment goes right into that. So the needs are very present. Thank you so much. And Logan, what a delight. And Julie, I mean, I just love the fact that we had Jennifer and teachers who are right with us today. It was just totally a delight. And I have big notes on all of you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Archer and Logan, of course, for your forthrightness and sharing. With that, I know we're getting close to the end of our time here, but did just want to invite Senator Denbrow, Co-Chair Gardner, no expectation to do so, but just want to invite space for voice or others around reflections, connections to what we heard today and the work.
Well, I want to thank you for letting me lurk here today. It's been really good for me to hear these real world kinds of experiences and challenges, et cetera. And I really appreciated, Logan, your comments about your experience as a paraprofessional, and the notion of really targeting the training for paraprofessionals, and potentially looking at them as being on some kind of career ladder where, with the proper support, they could be helping us come into this. And several of us legislators on the education committees are really interested in supporting apprenticeship models, mentorship. We've put a chunk of money last session into that. It's not clear to me yet how exactly it's going to be used. It's being delivered through the Educator Advancement Council. But I think that, looking at student teaching / paraprofessionals, careers, I don't know. It's I think that could really help us to advance what we're talking about here. And that bifurcation between what happens in school, in the School of Ed, and what happens actually in the classroom, if we can find ways to kind of make them all part of the same process. Yeah. Anyway, I'd love any help, any of you at some point with this. Yes, Anita.
I'm involved in a research project at many elementary schools here in Oregon. And often they're taught by a teacher and 4 or 5 paraeducators. And I would love to take you on a tour, a day that you might be able to see both. And some paraeducators say, I want to be a teacher and this is preparation for it. And some of them say, well, I don't want to do conferences. I don't want to study at night. I want to learn these programs and teach them really well to make the kids smart. But this is where I want to end. So there's really 2 groups of them. But there are some that we should, like, every time I go, I say, have you thought about becoming a teacher? Because we need you desperately. And some of them say, yes, and I decided against it. Okay, well, what a delight. But I'm sincere, Michael. Come January, I wrote down a note to call you and say, would you like to?
Sounds great. Thank you, Nita.
Our Pathways programs for our paraeducators are really amazing. We have one now in Beaverton. And my librarian assistant went through it, and now she's teaching 3rd grade at my school right now. So, and I had an interview this week with another paraprofessional, and she was outstanding. And I was like, and what's your future goal? Like, you're going to be a teacher, right? And then, but thinking about that as part of the council as well, is that when we have our paraprofessionals, when they have a really wide range of knowledge, and then supporting them through their pathway is really, that'd be amazing. I have a lot of work to do this weekend, actually, on council work, because I think with the next set of our deliverables coming up, really making sure that I've have that and kind of at the same time living in the world of trying to see what my school needs. So it feels like looking at the framework right now, and then we had a tool here that was like a walkthrough tool that I didn't feel like right now is sufficient. So how am I bringing in from the framework and already thinking about that? But I get ahead of myself too much because I keep forgetting like that council is like just the teacher prep, and knowing that they're going to have some of this, and then my role as a principal of how I'm supporting new teachers. And then we've also talked on the council of like, what do our administrator license also need to make sure that our administrators understand what they're looking for in the classroom. So I look at the list that we're looking at right now, and it feels like a lot. And Logan, I'm glad you were here today to be like, okay, I have to remember that it's somebody very new, and there's so much that we're learning, along with really the emotional challenges of being a new educator and developing that resiliency. So there's a lot, I think, that's going into it. So I have to remind myself to just kind of go slow and make sure we're putting in no fluff. It's just what we really need our prep programs to have.
I've got to tell you,
And I'd love to be able to just chime in here, just on that note, Dr. Archer, with respect, if I could just get in edgewise. Jennifer just touched on an issue that I had a question about, just given that like there's teacher prep and what is in the influence and control of teacher prep, and then there's the school system, and then there's like broader environmental issues that, you know, I'm hearing a lot in the governor's office that from educators that kids are different after the pandemic. And so I'm just curious, you know, the governor made some commitments this week following the PPS strike, just about like what's charting a path forward on K-12 education, with one component of really convening a multidisciplinary group to look at students' social emotional health needs and really creating an action plan to support the needs of school employees, for all the way from administrators, all school employees, and teachers, to make sure that they are supported to support students' needs. So my question is like, what is the role, do you think, of students' social emotional well-being that plays into the ability to teach kids to read and write? And relatedly, what do you think are some of the most pressing needs of the state that we should be thinking about starting or continuing to do in service of strengthening those needs? So I'm just going to put this question in the chat, and just curious what any of you on the panel have to say about that.
Well, I'm going to jump in real quick and say, just like off the cuff, that the role that I think social emotional well-being plays is like the ability for students to self-regulate and to be in a large group. Logan mentioned having a student throw a chair across the classroom. I would like to say that is not common, but that's not the truth. In both of my schools that I work in, there are young children who are physically aggressive, violent, bite, yell, throw tantrums. And so when they cannot self-regulate, and the teacher's trying to manage that, along with trying, you know, to figure out what phoneme you're going to teach, it's really challenging. And so I would just say, like, that self-regulation, like having children be able to self-regulate and to know how to be a student and what it looks like to be a learner, is like step number one.
And Julie, are you feeling that that's gotten worse? You know, is this, I mean, we hear that a lot of it is COVID related, but are there larger trends that you're seeing that even preceded COVID, or, you know, has it really gotten worse?
You know, I don't know if it's because, you know, we spent quite a bit of time, you know, in our homes teaching from home, or like in a very limited, you know, small group setting kind of situation. Honestly, like I decided to pursue a reading endorsement and work in intervention because I had some really big behaviors that last year that I was in the classroom, and I was like, oh my gosh, I am going to either be put in a mental institution or I'm going to go to jail if I continue down this path. And I decided I needed to do something different. And so it existed before, but I feel like the magnitude, the bigness of it, the behaviors are big. I just and the children are young. That's what I think is most shocking, because I do feel like they are younger. Like, since COVID, I mean, there are kindergarten kids that in both of my buildings, last year and this year, that have either gone like unidentified because they haven't been in like early intervention programs, or maybe they weren't going to the pediatrician as much, or I'm not exactly sure what it is, but it's significant.
Yeah, I would just add as well, I don't think ours is just from COVID. We kind of base a lot of our work on just some trauma-informed practices of like what's happened to you rather than what's wrong with you. So, but I would say pre-COVID, we had a lot of intense behaviors. The social emotional framework we use is through the Yale Center for Social Emotional Learning, and it really begins with adult regulation and awareness of how we are showing up. And so as an administrator, a lot of my work is first and foremost of educator resiliency. And that comes a lot with Elena Aguilar's work on Onward. I mean, that book is incredible because it really helps educators to think about not self-care in the sense of like, I'm going home early, self-care and boundaries, or, just a variety of things, I think, that play a role that, but I do think the behaviors are really big. What I would say, if you were to think systemic, would be that our early warning and referral system is really not working. We're missing, and I think about if it's like age 3 and 4, if they're daycare providers that are not able to see and diagnose early signs, and then we're healthcare providers, if they're seeing a consistent pediatrician, if they missed the well child visit, was there a translator for the well child visit? So that's my work right now. I feel like is trying to figure out, every year I get a certain amount of kindergartners that haven't been really identified with early intervention. And then we scramble all through kindergarten trying to put those resources in place. So I think there's some good work that we can do as a state to maybe a statewide need. I don't know if there's a needs assessment, but as a state, how do we do birth to 5 better? To really do wraparound. And where that begins with work in our early childhood centers to identify and then have supportive placements that help children, get what they need so that they're able to not be unsupported in kindergarten. I think there's good work we can do here as a state with birth to 5.
Yeah, absolutely.
It may be beyond our commission. And I think
Can I add something?
No matter how important it is, that we might not want to go beyond our mission. But there is at the University of Oregon one of the largest grants on young students and behavior that we should be talking to, because they are doing an excellent job.
Can I add something about this?
Shawnaz, go ahead, and we're going to wrap up because I know that folks have to go. We're at time. Go ahead, Shawnaz.
Okay. I wanted to agree with Julie. I think that we were already seeing behaviors trend upward before COVID. I certainly think they've been amplified and magnified, particularly in our current 4th grade, 3rd grade, 2nd grade, 1st grade, those kids who were in those really, really formative interpersonal skill developmental years, who were trapped at home on probably devices, electronic devices, way more than we know is healthy for them in those years that they're usually learning those interpersonal skills. Our current kindergarten cohort seems to be a little bit more on trend with pre-COVID behavior. But the thing I really wanted to say about social emotional, while echoing that it is a huge challenge. It's a huge layer that's very challenging to instruction. One of the things that is most social emotionally dysregulating for kids grade is not read and write. When they get into third grade and above and they figure out the discrepancy, their personal discrepancy compared to their peers, that is socially and emotionally dysregulating in a way that has very, very long lasting effects for many kids.
Well,
Yeah.
look at prisons, look at juveniles, their literacy rates. I mean, it's definitely becomes a major challenge. So teaching them how to read at the highest level possible is one of the many ways that we can reduce this kind of stress. And for teachers too, teachers know how to teach reading, and the kids are getting smart. That reduces their stress. So the whole commission is designed for children and for teachers and for principals, Jennifer. I have to go because there's a football game. I went to University of Washington and they're playing University of Oregon, and I'm rooting for Oregon, but all of my nephews and their parents are in Las Vegas. They are watching the game up close and personal, and they've already sent me messages. Are you watching it, Archer?
Well, we're wrapping up, so perfect
We're
time,
wrapping up.
Dr. Archer. So I'm just going to wrap up with just some closing thoughts and just deep appreciation for our panel sharing with us today. And I just, I'm just struck about the ways that the governor, when she came first to the council meeting on September 25th, said that it is going to take all of us to have a role on this. Like, it is not all on educator prep. We also have a role in communities and parents. And we know that parents and caregivers have not necessarily been systemically supported as full partners in children's literacy development. And that's not a deficit on the parents, right? It's like we actually haven't changed, we haven't created the conditions for that. And so that's why the Early Literacy Success Initiative is more than the Early Literacy Educator Preparation Council. It's also the implementation of House Bill 3198 with Senator Dembro's support and many of the legislators, and the bipartisan nature of that bill both created resources for what we need to do to shore up instruction and professional development and coaching and curriculum in schools, as well as how we support birth to 5 parents and caregivers as full partners in their children's literacy development and the role of sovereign tribal nations. So we're really grateful for the partnership of the legislature, the partnership of all of you on the council and your expertise, as well as our partners in both the educator preparation space and the K-12 space. So just really deep appreciation for all of you and the work that you do, to Ken and Lynn for helping organize this, and to all of you for taking the time to attend today. We'll let you get to your weekend and to your games and your travel, and hope you have the good weekend. Take care.